What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. Welcome to the Verified AMA. I'm your host, Lawton Ho, here with Verified Investing, and I go live every single day that the markets are open, and sometimes when they're not, to answer your questions. How's everybody doing today? I hope you guys have a good weekend. I'm going to be live from now 12:30 all the way until 1:15. So, hope everybody's doing well. Let me do this. Okay. All right. What's up, everybody? I have my questions up. I'm severely lacking today. Let me sign in here. All right. As always, guys, if you want to ask your questions, you can go ahead and scan this QR code down below or visit the verifiedinvesting.com website. I will be happy to answer any questions. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, and I'd also like to say, if you enjoy this type of content, please consider giving us a like and subscribing, sharing it with your friends on YouTube. Anyways, I was looking at this Caterpillar chart earlier, and Caterpillar seems to be finally breaking down from this upsloping trend line. We try to break here on Thursday, retrace back to the top of it, and finally are confirming a breakdown today. First level of support is this gap fill here at 394. But anyways. All right, let's just hop into the questions here. All right. Lamont says, what beautiful sick name. Sick name, by the way. Lamont says, let me do this. Lamont says, what platform do you use to make trades? I use Thinkorswim for stocks and ETFs, and I use Blofin, Blofin, for crypto. Mar says, hi, Lon. What's up, Mar? Hope you're doing well. You're in Singapore, right? Hope you're doing well. Nathan says, where is INTC's resistance? Also, is this a good time to short Bitcoin? INTC, where is the resistance? Okay. Great move up. Was up significantly higher today. Where am I going to say? It's these earnings, right? These earnings over here, 2263, are going to be absolutely massive. It's going to be insane for the stock. And let me tell you why. This company, Intel, fell 8%, 9% almost, off of earnings and continued to plummet over 16%. Okay? And it's just now starting to recover. So if we come back up here, that's basically the market saying that, oh, even though the earnings were horrendous, 929% worse than expected, it doesn't matter. We're going to fill that gap. So there's going to be a lot of sellers there, a lot of resistance right there at that $22.63 mark. All right? $22.63. As far as Bitcoin is concerned, is this a good time to short Bitcoin? Well, you saw I had this bearish wedge. It retraced to it, actually broke above it and broke this upsloping trend line, which actually favors a move higher on Bitcoin, right? Look at this. Broke down from this wedge, beautifully retraced to it, couldn't break it, finally broke it yesterday, is continuing momentum higher, was all the way up to 122, pushing towards new all-time highs. My level of resistance, I have this trend line, right? And now if it hit that trend line, it would be somewhere around here. Do I think it's going to go to 129? Not particularly. But this level of resistance is double top at 123. I'd be comfortable entering a short at around 123. Basically that double top, right? Jessica says, "Dear Lawton, what's up, Jessica? Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a good weekend. What's your take on Nvidia and AMD, given the United States 15% of its chip sales to China? Bullish or bearish on stocks?" Okay, so here's the thing, and we were talking about this. I was talking about this with Gareth and Ben and the rest of the team. Okay, about is it bullish or bearish that Nvidia is and AMD are giving their chip stocks 15% of their profits, right? 15% of their China sale profits to the government. Well, here's what I said. Ben thought that it was probably bearish, right? Because that seems like a huge tax that the consumer might have to pay for. I said bearish just because, Nvidia and AMD are going to be losing money, right? They're losing money, right? But people might say that it's actually bullish for AMD and Nvidia just because that would put them in more favorable standing with the United States government, right? Policy-wise. And you think about it like this. What is more, Nvidia and AMD have, let's just take a look at Nvidia, has had an insane run, right? Continuing to make all-time highs, continuing higher, like has had an absolutely incredible, unprecedented run up from basically 2022 up around 1,500%, right? Absolutely crazy move, meteoric rise. It fell on Liberation Day, but until this moment, every time Nvidia had earnings, it would do pretty well. It was continuing higher, continuing its momentum. Now you see this drop. The one time that Nvidia fell, and it fell 43%, why did it fall? It fell because of Liberation Day, because of the mass tariffs, right? The blanket tariffs announced by Donald Trump and his government, right? And that was the bearish news, that it was going to get impacted. Their business was going to get impacted. Their costs would go bad. But, up until then, the earnings were fine. The company was going steadily up. So is 15% of China sales bearish? Yeah, they're going to lose some money. But they're not going to lose as much money as they would have if Trump put a 15% tariff on chips or didn't allow them to sell chips to China at all, right? So there's a couple ways to look at that. So the question now is, can Nvidia continue its upward momentum and continue to pay out and make a lot of money, right? Despite losing 15% of their China sales? Likely yes, right? But we're going to see. Nvidia does have earnings in about 2 weeks, guys. 2 weeks. And that is going to be the single most important earnings of the whole season for the entire market, right? The market has largely been controlled by these stocks, right? By these chip stocks, excuse me. So should Nvidia put poor earnings or have poor guidance and actually tell us that, yeah, actually this 15% that we're giving back to the United States, that's actually going to hurt us quite a bit? That could cause a fall in the charts. Okay. All right, guys. For those of you just tuning in, welcome to the Verified AMA. My name is Lawton Ho, your host here. If you want to ask your questions, go ahead and scan that QR code or visit the verifiedinvesting.com homepage, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have about anything. I'd be happy to answer anything about stocks, crypto, sports, whatever you want. Asta says, I would like to ask where Link is to buy best place to buy Link. I think you're talking about Chainlink. Yeah, Chainlink, look at this. I had this beautiful downsloping trend line, and it continued higher. Absolutely destroyed it, crushed it, continued higher off of this break. And I had this drawn a long time ago. had like almost a 60% move higher. So if you're talking about where to buy, right, you don't want to buy here, right? And could it go higher? Yeah, it likely could go higher. It's possible. But I would say that it favors a pullback before it moves higher. So if you love Chainlink, if you think it's going to go back to all-time highs here at $53 or wherever, like I would just say then find levels to buy on pullbacks, buy the dip, if you will. Right? And for me, I would really love to purchase back here, 23% lower, but that's just not realistic, right? Let's say if it retraces to this previous high pivot, it had no trouble crossing it earlier. If it comes back down about $20.30, you can consider buying. A couple things to note. If this move up higher and you see some nice sideways consolidation forming almost a bull flag, you can consider going long, right? But this is what I usually tell people, right? Let's say you just want to get in. You don't care. You just want to get in. That's fine, right? I've done that too. Just hop in, but make sure you're playing with a stop loss, right? Because, yeah, it favors a move lower, but if you think it's going to go higher, let's say you enter here, where would be a good level that I would put a stop loss if I had to enter here? I'd put a stop loss like somewhere around here, right? Maybe about 2% out of the money. So I put a stop loss right here. So my max loss is here around not 2%, $2 out of the money rather, $1.90 out of the money. And because this is a 9% lower, right? I'm risking 9%. I really want to look for a gain above that, right? So for me, if I did that, I would target maybe around this resistance level up here, these double pivots, around 21% higher, around $26.36. If you absolutely have to go long right now and you want to chase it, right? And you can maintain that good risk to reward ratio. You're risking essentially 8.5%, but your potential take profit is 20.6%. That's like above, it's like a 2.4, 2.5 percent. 2.5 risk to reward ratio. I can't even talk right now. My brain is fried from this weekend, but we're getting back into it. All right. Samuel says, hi, under smart money stocks and ETFs. I'm wondering as to where you guys put a stop as to right confirmation below a price. Does that mean you're willing to hold, waiting for a daily? You can't hold the confirmation below that price before you sell? Yes, absolutely. Juan says, hi, Lon. What's up, Juan? Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a great weekend. Your take on UPXI? Cool. This is a tiny company, guys. And, as always, when we're talking about smaller companies, I'll tell you that I haven't traded it before. Right? Like I've traded a lot of different stocks, but this is not one of them. This is also not something I'd be comfortable trading just because it's so small, right? It's so small. Like you're talking 320 million market cap. So I'm not really interested. Usually I'm not interested in anything under 1.5 billion, right? But this, look at this. The spread from the bottom of the day to the top of the day, 15%. This thing moves a lot. So can you trade this? Absolutely. Is there money to be made in these micro caps? Absolutely. But I wouldn't be comfortable holding them, overnight at all. What I would be comfortable doing is potentially day trading them, right? Because there's so much movement and volatility. This isn't something I do personally, but this is something that you can do. Look at this move. From the top to the bottom, you could have made 8% there, but that's assuming that you shorted at the top and you covered at the bottom, right? That's not realistic, right? But these intraday moves are so big that, yeah, you could potentially trade them. But for a day trade, right, depending on your method. But for a swing trade, I don't have too much on this. I mean, you have a couple down-sloping trend lines, which are bullish, right, which do favor a move to the upside. It tried to pierce here, but I do like this as a potential breakout candidate. But again, such a small company, I would stay away personally. But if you do decide to play a stock like this, make sure you use a stop loss, just because it's really, really volatile. Okay. Jay says, "What's up, Lawton? Appreciate you. Appreciate you too, Jay. Please tell GEV to chill out. That's all. Thanks." GEV is crazy. Look at this stock. Just absolutely parabolic movement from those Liberation Day lows. Currently up around 155%, right? But you might be seeing some stalling out. For me, I have this upsloping trend line here. If GEV breaks that, I do anticipate a move lower. But aside from that, this is you have kind of a wedge here, but I don't like that because there's so much price action above it. And it might be okay, but I don't like it that much, to be honest. Let me see if I can find anything else on GEV. Okay, so you have a decent wedge forming, right? That's formed on GEV. You have pivot here, high pivot here, low pivot, low pivot, low pivot. I love this bottom trend line. The top trend line is okay. It's not my favorite, but it's fine. But upsloping wedge favors a move lower. So, and this goes with every single stock at all-time high, right? Especially one that's gone up 155% in a matter of months, right? Basically 3 or 4 months. Yes, it favors a move lower, 100%. But the question is when and at what time is it going to do that? But, and certainly earnings was a candidate for that. Earnings over here was definitely a candidate for it to move lower, but it just pushed higher because it had great earnings, right? Great earnings. So for me, I'm watching this upsloping trend line over here to the bottom. If this breaks, I expect a move lower, significant move lower to GEV, at least about 15% drop in GEV. Chad says, "Hi, Lon. What's up, Chad? Hope you're doing well. Hope you enjoyed the weekend." I did. It was okay. It was all right. Thanks again for your level on DOW on Friday. I'm watching the level like a hawk to add to my long play. Please, could you give your opinion on a major swing long level for Lulu? Yeah, Lululemon get crushed on earnings. Could Friday's daily candle be a potential bottoming tail? I'm currently 10% down, so I'm wondering what I might add. Yeah, it certainly could be, but it really depends on where. Let me see. I don't think it's not a bottoming tail, just because it has to close in the top 25% of the bar. I don't think it's in the top 25%. It's not in the top 25%, so it's not a bottoming tail. But for me, for my levels of support on Lululemon, you see them all the way down here: 181, 177, 87, 172, 34, and 150. 497. If you want to know how I got those levels, let's just take a trip back. I'm just scrolling back, and I'll show you where I got those levels on. Yeah, Lululemon. We're talking about COVID levels now, right? COVID low levels. You have a beautiful gap fill down here at 181.10, approximately 3% lower. You have a pivot low here around 177.89. You have a gap fill I quite like here at 172.34. You have 155 basically a level here for a gap fill. And finally, the COVID lows on the 18th of March at 128.71. Right? Lululemon has had a rough time recently, which is surprising considering how popular Lululemon was and kind of still is. But I'm not personally in this, but I'd probably start a position around here, the 181 level. And my ad would probably be here around 172-ish, or I'd wait here for a little bit lower before I add it, maybe 14% lower, that 150, basically pierce at 155. Right? But if you like these levels, you can just screenshot this, or you can pause it and watch the replay later. Okay. Brewski says, "Good afternoon, Lawton." What's up, Brewski? Hope you're doing well. Gareth pointed out a cup and handle on SRPT on Friday. Has it been canceled? Has it been canceled for a day trade? For a day trade? Do you assess any levels? SRPT, not really. You have this cup and handle potentially. I don't have any levels for potential day trade. However, you do have this upsloping trend line that if it breaks, favors a move lower, right? This is also a smaller company, not something I personally would trade, but of course Gareth and I trade differently, right? And that's the thing, right? Just because we're part of the same team doesn't mean that we need to trade identical to each other. But yes. Mar says not Singapore, Holland. Sorry, Mar. Someone else said Singapore. Sorry, Holland. Right. Sorry about that. I love Holland. I've never been, but my girlfriend and I watch videos of like this couple in Holland, and they like live in a cabin in the middle of like the plains, and they like cook and stuff. So we just kind of watch them, their live streams. But chip follower, yep. I did answer that earlier about the Nvidia chips. I hope you heard that. Chip follower. If you didn't, I said that there's two cases. You could say it's bearish because 15% tax is only on the China sales, right? And it's a lot better than, getting the ban, right? So it's better. Sarah says, thank you, Lawton. Of course, Sarah, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you being here every single day to ask me questions. And XRP, is there one weekly? Is there one Head and Shoulders? Let me just remove all this stuff. There's one Head and Shoulders and one inverse Head and Shoulders in the short term. Flag, let's see. And thank you for sending your chart. If you guys want to send me a chart, you can do so by clicking this little camera on your TradingView application and clicking on the copy link and sending that to me. Okay, so on the first, the Head and Shoulders pattern, let's see here. You want to talk about your shoulders like this. I'm having difficulty finding this. Is the hourly right? Weekly? Daily? This is not a Head and Shoulders, valid Head and Shoulders, because of this little thing. If you don't count this low pivot, then it would be valid. As far as an inverse Head and Shoulders, I did have that drawn on my chart previously before I went and deleted all my work. You had something like this. But is XRP forming a bull flag? It could be, could very well be. You had this nice upward movement, up move, and then sideways, downwards consolidation. Could be bullish for XRP. Really, it's going to depend on the rest of the crypto markets. However, this upward move and down to sideways consolidation is bullish, right? You want to close above this down sloping trend line. And if you can get above these pivots here, I know that's 10% away, but if you are able to get above these pivots on XRP, you could likely see a move higher. Let me see if I have any reference points. Yeah, you could see a move higher. My next resistance on XRP, let's see if I have anything. I don't like that. I'm trying to get it to this high pivot. So I'm kind of a perfectionist. Okay, there you go. So let's see. Let's go back. So you have this trend line that it was not able to close above. Let me delete this. Was not able to close above. You saw how I found that trend line. If you can get above, yeah, favors to move higher. This is not a valid inverse head and shoulders pattern, right? It is not a valid inverse head and shoulders pattern because it is upsloping. Upsloping is bearish. Downsloping is bullish, right? That's why in a bull flag, you have to go up and you have to go down. Downsloping is bearish. In fact, this could be the next level of resistance for XRP. You have these two trend lines. So it'd likely be somewhere around this $3.57 level and this $3.41 level. Okay, next question. Mar says, do you still think the head and shoulders on Solana will play out? Solana came back up significantly, but is the head and shoulders still valid, right? You're talking about this head and shoulders pattern. I'm assuming something like this, right? Something like this. It's still valid as long as this doesn't get above the head. But here's the thing, right? And this is the neckline, right? It's traded just along the neckline now. The further removed, let me turn this into quintessential question. I always forget to do these. Okay, guys, the further away you get from a head and shoulders pattern, and for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, we're talking about this head and shoulders pattern, right? The further away that you get from a head and shoulders pattern, as this one is, the less likely it is to play out. But we see this measured move as a move down about 18% lower. But I'd argue that that head and shoulders pattern is no longer valid because it already played out, right? When we have an inverse head and shoulders pattern, it rarely goes the full measured move. Now it can absolutely, but most of the time you see 50, 60, 70% playing out of that move. And in this case, it played out about, you're talking like 60% of the measured move. So I'd say that head and shoulders pattern is done for. But you see this neckline is providing some good resistance. Good resistance for Solana. Now, if Solana is unable to break above this trend line, you could see it coming down a bit lower, right, to that potential measured move, but you're going to need to get past some of these, some of these key levels of support. Okay. Mar says Bitcoin went bananas last weekend. What is your general opinion about that situation? I mean, Bitcoin for me, look at this. It had this beautiful downsloping trend line that it was knocking on, right? And this one, and I had this upsloping trend line that it broke down and retraced to and try to get above. And finally yesterday, it pierced this level of resistance, as well as this downsloping trend line. For me, I would not be interested in touching this until double top, but I'd consider a short there. Lawton says, charting questions. When prices are entering new all-time highs territory, what is your favorite technique when trying to determine good shorting opportunities? That is an amazing, amazing question, and I'm going to turn this into a teachable moment. All right, guys. So when we're talking about shorting something or looking for taking profits on something at all-time highs like Bitcoin, you have if you're talking about something with previous price data, yeah, it's super easy to find levels. I can find you gap fills. I can use fibs. I can find like trend lines, right? Easier trend lines. But when you're talking about things entering new territory, unexplored territory, scary, right? Because you don't know exactly where it's going to pull back. But for me, I like to use upsloping trend lines. And in this case, in Bitcoin, I found one by using this high pivot to the previous all-time high. And that's quite a ways away. I mean, 7.5%, Bitcoin can definitely move there easily, but that would be around 129, basically $130,000. So for me personally, when I'm looking at levels to potentially short something at all-time highs or looking for places to take profits, I generally like to use trend lines to do that. But if you're in a long position, let's just say you buy Bitcoin and you're just holding it, right? You're like, oh, it's going to go higher. It's been going higher. Might as well. That's a fine strategy too. But it's so important to put a stop loss in. And in fact, you are able to use something called a trailing stop, which means as Bitcoin or whatever stock continues to move higher, right, and you're not really seeing too many levels of resistance, then you don't need to take profits immediately, right? You can put a stop loss. Let's say my stop loss is right here. I'm long, but my stop loss is here at 117. Well, as Bitcoin moves higher, I'm going to continue to move my stop loss higher so I can kind of maximize gains and protect myself from any sudden downside, right? Like Liberation Day, that happened just like boom, right? But if you're long anything before Liberation Day, you were in the money significantly, right? Because stocks were at all-time highs. But if you didn't have a trailing stop, you would have woken up the next morning and been, lost significant portion of your potential gain. All right. GB says INTC, good entry level. For me, INTC, Intel, my level for an entry for a pullback is under $20, anywhere under $20. But this beautiful bottoming tail was the signal about a week ago. And I'm going to be live for the next 15 minutes, guys. If you want to drop your questions in, be happy to answer them. I'll do my best to answer as many questions as I can. Hey, UPXI is a Solana treasury holder. Gotcha. Mike says, hi, Lon. What's up, Mike? Hope you're doing well. If you were to swing LRCX, yes. Where do you see it going this week? Thank you. Look at this trend line. Speaking of trend lines, and I love trend lines, boom, boom. And where is it pulling back from? There today. For me, I think it's going back to this gap fill, to be honest. It's up, but I think it's going to go back to this and retrace to this gap fill. I think it will get a bounce there, but let's see what caused it to move higher. Not sure. Off of Applied Materials earnings, I'm not sure. Lamb Research does have earnings, did just have earnings a couple of weeks ago. But for me, I think it's going lower before it goes higher. You just want to see it break this upsloping trend line. If it does, I have a gap fill over here at 107.64. And I have this trend line about 10% higher. So could it get up there? Absolutely. But it needs to break this upsloping trend line first. Okay, if it can do that, break this level of resistance, then it can definitely make a move higher. Again, I've been wrong before, and I'll be wrong again, right? But all I can do is give you guys the probabilities of what I believe is likely to happen. Sarah says, thank you, Lawton. Of course, is XLM forming a pennant or a wedge or a triangle? Which direction is XLM heading in the near term? Thanks. Absolutely. Let's take a look at your chart as well. Sarah, thank you for sending your chart. So, okay. So that's kind of like a wedge, but actually I would argue that this is forming potentially, and this is similar to that other chart. I don't remember which one we were talking about, Ethereum probably, XRP. But up move and sideways consolidation is actually bullish, right? This formation is actually bullish, right? Despite it moving up 22% in in over a week, just over a week. This formation up move sideways consolidation looks bullish to me, right? If you can continue this sideways downward consolidation, it's a bull flag and favors a move higher. I see that wedge that you have. For those of you who aren't able to see, Sarah's that's not it. Sarah's wedge is like somewhere from kind of like this, and then this, right? Kind of like that. And you can see, I always explain to my friends when I'm like stock trading, I'm like, okay, I stare at these charts go red, green, red, green, red, green, and I draw lines everywhere. I look like somebody trying to find out, like a conspiracy theorist on like a board, drawing lines and connecting strings everywhere. Anyways, you don't care about that. But you have this nice downsloping trend line from boom, boom, third hit today. So if it breaks above it, it could go higher and likely will go higher. If it breaks above this trend line, I would anticipate a move up at least about 9 to 10%. Looks actually bullish on XLM. Mar says, hi, Lon. Would you start short or long on Solana right now, and why, and what don't I see? For me on Solana, I don't have too much, to be honest. This chart is not very exciting to me. Doesn't do it for me. Doesn't get me going. Does favor a move higher, right? And I'll show you where you're likely to find resistance. So I have a bullish bias towards Solana. I think you're going to find resistance along this trend line around 17% higher, but you've had a nice move up, right? You're talking about a 17-18% move higher. So I expect a small pullback, but I'd be interested in re-entering somewhere around 164 if it came down lower. Vishal says, at what levels do we short XRP, Ethereum, Hype? I'm sorry, Vishal. I'm just going to answer one. You sent me like 3 and you want my levels and my targets. That's just a little too much. I've talked about XRP and Ethereum a little bit, so I don't know if I've actually talked about Ethereum, but I'll answer about Hype. So look on this. I had this beautiful, beautiful upsloping trend line favoring a move lower, and it retraced, came down, and has now bounced. For me, my level to short Hype would likely be on a retrace to this trend line, probably around $49.72. Okay, around $49.72 for a target. I don't know. You have to ask me when the chart gets there. David says, hi, Lon. What's up, David? Chipotle looks deeply oversold. It is. It really is. After that big gap down following earnings. Yep. Do you think it might be due for a rebound to start closing that gap? Yeah, actually, my long level on Chipotle is right around $41.68. I had a beautiful gap fill right there, and it's had not the biggest bounce, right? But, up 20 cents, about a 20-cent bounce. That's my first level for an entry long. My next level to add to it or entry, if you want to wait for it to come a little lower before scooping up some Chipotle, is right here, basically right under $40 at $39.74. Again, you can take a picture, check it out, and see if it moves higher. Okay, Renica says, hi, Lon, what's up? Monday, got crushed. I saw that. Absolutely decimated, right? I entered 181 for a swing long swing trade. Any advice on levels? I don't really give financial advice, but that level seems pretty decent. I have support for it as well down here at 172.15. That was actually my level to go long. 172.15 was that level for me. But, looks pretty decent, right? You have tons of levels on support on this thing. Should it continue lower? You have another gap fill down here around 154, right? That's quite a ways lower. You're talking about 10% lower. But generally, I'm comfortable adding every 10% or so. Of course, I'm not strict with that, but just wherever there's a bounce. But look there, at 10% lower than that, you have another gap fill. But the most important thing is to utilize good position sizing, because you don't want to get caught, because this thing can move a lot. As far as profit-taking levels, it's kind of tough because it just gapped down. I would probably look for maybe 13, 14% on this. AK says, hey, Lon, question, but let me know if you have more questions, Veronica. AK says, hi, Lon, what's up, AK? Question. Answer. What is the difference between using the 15-minute chart and the 10-minute chart? Great question. Let's turn this into a teachable moment. All right, so you see up here, I have the 1 minute, 10 minute, 1 hour, daily, and weekly. The longer the time frame, right, the more powerful the move, right? And the chart that you're looking at will likely determine your time horizon for the expected move. If I see a head and shoulders pattern on the 1 minute, I expect that to play out within minutes. If I see a head and shoulders pattern on the daily, I'm expecting that move to play out over a number of days. So it really depends on kind of your time horizon. Okay, your time horizon. Chad says, thank you for your levels on Lululemon. Of course, please, could you give your thoughts on swing long levels on Lyft? Yeah, I have a level at $13. I love this level. This was the gap fill from the previous earnings. If it came down there, I'd 100% be a buyer because look at that. This is from the previous earnings. It fell on these earnings, but it gapped up 12% higher, continued significantly higher. For me, $13 is my level for bounce on Lyft, right? If you want to get in, should it continue down, you have this liberation low level, 25% lower, and in kind of in the middle area is this nice gap fill here, around $11 basically. Okay. Am I right thinking there's a downward parallel channel? Down sloping parallel channel. Let's see if you're right. I don't know. Could be, yeah. I like this actually. This is a good parallel channel. Great job in spotting that. The only thing is you only have really one data point on the bottom trend line. I know it kissed here, and it hit it here, so now it would be valid. But let's see if this can hold, right? But this is actually bullish. Downsloping parallel channels are bullish. All right. Well, you're welcome, Chad. Thanks for your questions. Mike says, hi, Lawton. Getting echo. Sorry about that. Not sure why that is. I don't see any more comments about echo. LRCX, I did give my LRCL. Shaw says Nifty. And Nifty long short trade levels. Again, this is the Indian stock market, I believe, and not something that I've previously traded, to be honest. However, my level of support is here. I have a nice gap fill here and another one around here. These are two levels that I'd consider going long. You have support levels here and here. So if you want to take a picture of this, you can. But generally, this down. I keep messing this up. This downward trend favors a move higher. Right? This is bullish. This is a bullish. Mar says, "Hey Lon, do you like South Park?" I do like South Park. Haven't watched it in a while, but I know those new episodes were a little crazy. I did see that on Twitter. Sam says, HD Home Depot daily chart. Does the triangle form does this look bearish? Look like bearish consolidation to you, or do you see it differently? For me, let's see. I mean, I do think that trend line on the bottom that you had here, this is bearish, 100%. This, if it breaks down. Now, the question is, will it break down? Don't have to, right? Doesn't have to break down. But you have this beautiful wedge that it's now created, right? Look at this wedge. I know Dr. B is out there salivating somewhere. But you have this nice wedge here on a Home Depot that should this break, could fall. You could short it up here and stop out, 2% out of the money, right? And then look for a move down. I would look for a move like 13% on the money, to be honest, on this. Tyler says, yo, what up? Can you say if Tesla is out of the wedge? Yeah, it is. I'm actually going to write an article about this. Tesla, I'm bullish on Tesla. No, broke out of the wedge. Favors a move higher. I'm looking for a move at least 13-14% higher. This gap fill is where I'm targeting 392. Looks bullish, man. The rest of the stocks are at all-time highs. Tesla still beaten down because of Elon's disagreement with Trump, combined with less than favorable earnings. Yeah, I think this thing Broke out of this wedge though, so it looks bullish. 13%. You're gonna find some resistance at this pivot high, 7% higher, but I think that it should be able to get past this just because the wedge is so powerful. Michelle, thanks, brother. You're doing a great job. No questions, just adulations for you this time. Of course, Vishal, and I know that I didn't get to all of your questions, but it's kind of hard for me to do that. But I try my best. Okay, last question. Sarah says, "You are awesome, Lawton. You are awesome, Sarah, for asking your questions. How do you find the buy signal on the VIX forming bull flags?" Yep. So I had this down sloping kind of parallel. Was it on the hourly? It was on the hourly. So I had this kind of down sloping. This is bullish to me. For me, on a buy, I would buy on a retrace of this. Maybe $2 lower, but that's significantly lower. I think the levels of VIX would be a good buy anywhere below $15. Pretty much, I'd likely be a buyer. Whew. All right. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining me again. My name is Lawton Ho here with Verified Investing. If you enjoyed this program, please consider giving it a like, giving it a subscribe on YouTube, Verified Investing. And if you like this, I do this every single day. I do this every single day from 12:30 to 1:15. And I appreciate all of you being here and asking questions. If you have more questions that I did not answer, okay, then you can just send them to me on Twitter. And my Twitter handle is @Lawton Investing. Just my name, Lawton, followed by the word investing. You can send me a DM, ask me to chart something. I'd be happy to do so. I might not respond right away, but I try to do my best to answer my DMs throughout the day. All right. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Best of luck trading, guys. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.